right, so I'm currently on the phone with Kevin. He's another musician that reached out about the interview series. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Straine. I am a California native and a guitar player, vocalist, in whatever capacity anyone needs me to play for. I've been playing in church, and I learned a lot in church music for a long time. But I've also jammed with a bunch of people all over Southern California, whether it's Pasadena, LA, or here where I live in the Inland Empire, Riverside. And I just love music of all stripes, all kinds, and I'm happy to participate or just be a audience member as well.
Awesome, very cool. So I like to start kind of, in the seminal moments. When did you first find music, and what about it really kind of, spoke to you as something that, you wanted to contribute to?
Sure. The earliest memory I have of really getting into music is in the early '90s, and if you remember the radio landscape or the popular music landscape at the time, it was a lot of up and coming hip hop. Gangster rap was huge. There was the grunge scene as well, and I was not into any of that, which kind of made me an outcast a bit, a musical outcast for my little community. I was in elementary school at the time, or my grade school, or I guess it was junior high. But I remember my mom is a musician and comes from a line of musicians, and her father was a traveling singing evangelist. And at one stop, they actually shared an amphitheater with of some pretty huge musicians. And so my mom, as a kid, got lost backstage looking for her parents, and they were running rehearsals and whatnot, and doing tech stuff, which I assume back then wasn't very complicated. but my mom opened up a door, and all of a sudden she said she saw this group of guys in there, and one of them was BB King. And she said, "Hey, I'm looking for my parents." She was a kid at the time, and he grabbed her hand, and he led her down to where he knew the religious musicians were hanging out.
Mhm.
And she said he was the sweetest guy ever, and he helped deliver this 6, 7, 8 year old girl to her parents. And I thought that was a really sweet story. So as a kid, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I kind of like guitars. I didn't really know what guitars were or what guitar music sounded like at the time, but I thought, why not check this guy out who was nice to my mom when she was a kid?
Mhm.
And so I checked out BB King, and at the time he was coming out with a his first duets record. I can't remember if it was called Duets or not, but I mean, it just blew my mind. This blues sound, and he had a ton of guests on it, and it was amazing to me. And I was like, wow, this is like really. I think there was something about that soulful part of the music that not necessarily was not missing from popular music, not missing from hip hop or grunge necessarily, but the blues hit me in a different way
Mhm.
that really resonated. And so from then, I got into Clapton and Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, a lot of strap players from there, from that point on. And I really got into guitar music. And as I said, it was so out of touch with what everyone was listening to in popular music that I kind of just didn't talk about it much. I would retreat to my room and listen to these awesome blues CDs and blues rock and all this, music that was popular 20 years before I was born, and really vibe with it. I mean, I would get lost listening to this music for hours at a time. This real guitar centric stuff that seemingly I couldn't find anywhere else, and that's what really hit me. That was my earliest sort of memory of that.
Excellent. So once you kind of did make that connection to that style of music, did you pick up an instrument, start learning guitar on your own?
Sort of, kind of. So all of that guitar virtuosity led me to like the Beatles, right?
Hmm.
Because someone always says, of course, I'm sure you've heard this in your musical journey. Someone goes, "Oh, you like Hendrix? Well, you need to check this person out. Oh, you like Stevie Ray Vaughan? You need to check this person out." And so I eventually ended up with the Beatles, and I was like, "Wow, this is like amazing stuff." And at the time, I was just getting into high school, 1996, I guess,
Hmm.
and I saw this one guy, and he was playing guitar, and he got a lot of attention from the ladies, and I thought, oh, I want to kind of do that. That'd be interesting.
Hmm.
And so I knew that my stepdad had a guitar, and I pulled out his guitar and I brought it to him, and I said, "Hey, can you show me how to like use this thing? I'd love to be able to, play it."
Sure.
And he goes, "Yeah, sure." And my stepdad had a really cool, like a gospel. He grew up in the church as well, So he had like a gospel blues jazzy style sort of thing. And so he showed me a couple things and I was like, first of all, I was like, man, that's really difficult stuff to, to wrap my mind around. But I
Right.
started to work on it and I started to, put power chords together. And then a friend would show me like a G chord and an A minor, and I would play three chords for like, hours. My parents were always telling me to close the door because they didn't want to hear that progression over and over and over and over again.
Sure.
I shouldn't specify just my parents. It was really my whole family, all my siblings. Everyone was like, "Please shut the door."
We get it, a G and an A.
Yeah, but I mean, that was mesmerizing to me. The geometry of shapes and patterns, and I mean, it still fascinates me to this day.
Mhm.
Obviously, I know a little more than three chords, but I mean, it really fascinates me how you can loop something and then make a tiny adjustment and have it go off into a tangent of something else completely. That's I still love sitting with a guitar for hours if I could.
Sure. So, how much of that like exploration do you feel informs the way that you write on guitar?
It's strange. I told someone this recently. We were talking about music, and I said, it's really interesting because then in high school I got into like Dave Matthews Band, and then I got into Van Halen retroactively, and I was like, what in the world is happening with Eddie Van Halen and this guitar? Like that, it just blew my mind. 30 years after everyone else's mind was blown, of course. Um, and so I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I would listen to that stuff nonstop. And of course, that was a gateway to, grunge and then to Soundgarden and then to Nirvana and all that stuff. So I finally caught up eventually with the times, kind of, although I feel like I'm still catching up musically.
Hmm.
but, I thought to myself, it's weird because I would start writing songs. Anyone who's open to that sort of thing, says, oh, the Beatles played a song with three chords. I can put three chords together. Maybe I can say something.
Hmm.
And and then I thought, wow, it's weird. All the music I'm playing is not like it doesn't sound like anything that I'm listening to. Like it doesn't sound like Van Halen. It doesn't really even sound like the Beatles. It doesn't sound like my blues people that I'm really into. And I thought, wow, that's strange that that's not really manifesting like in my own voice. And it took me many years to learn that people actually will try to, copy and write in that style. I just always thought, oh, I need to like just, whatever voice comes from inside me or whatever chords my hands put together, that's what I have to work with, which I
Hmm.
think is a really cool kind of like authentic place to come from, but I didn't know any better.
Okay. And so along those lines, what was your first kind of steps into actually creating content with that instrument? Not to put it in such like productive terms, but once you had the mindset that you were making, you were creating music to a certain degree. What was the next step to like really kind of hone in and identify the type of stuff that you wanted to make?
Sure. So interestingly enough, I kind of felt like this tension within me, and it's a tension that a lot of working musicians had, even have still today. It's that I want to make music that's popular, but at the same time, this applies specifically to like the early days of like rock and roll and soul and blues and jazz, where a lot of these musicians were in the clubs Friday and Saturday night, and then they would go to church on Sunday morning. And so they had this sort of tension that said, "Oh, I'm making money in clubs, and it's not like a religious environment." Not so much anymore, I guess people feel this way. But then they have to go to church, and then the pastor would preach on how that nightlife is bad stuff. And
Hmm.
this is where Willie Nelson gets his famous phrase to his song, "The nightlife ain't no good life, but it's my life."
Hmm.
And so I kind of felt this tension growing up because I grew up in church schools. My sect or my part of Christianity is called Seventh Day Adventists,
Hmm.
and we worship on Saturday, and we have a bunch of schools. We really believe in education, and I came ever since second grade. I came up through these schools, and I would help out playing guitar when I could put five chords together because that's all you need for worship music, kind of.
Hmm.
I would play in our chapels for our schools and things like that, and I would play church music, but that wasn't really what I was into. I was into the blues and blues rock and anything with a loud guitar. And it just seemed like church music wasn't really making a lot of music with loud guitars.
Hmm.
And that's what I really wanted to do. So I had this tension in me where I would participate in these church events because I was happy to participate in a way that I felt like, oh, I can play the guitar. This is something I really like to do, and I get to play with other people. And I slowly learned that that's a really amazing part of being a musician is talking and interacting with others on your instrument. And so
Hmm.
I had that going for me, but at the same time, I had no desire to write religious music at all. I wanted to write, in the vein of Jimi Hendrix, and I wanted to do that, and I wanted to, write these blues stories. And I was really drawn to that format, the 12-bar blues, and the humor and the pain all wrapped up in one. And I thought, these things are so separate. I don't know if I can ever reconcile, religious music and also like the kind of music I want to make, or what religious people would call secular music.
Hmm.
And so when I started creating content, it was not religious at all. I would make these little songs, and I felt like, thinking back to my previous answer there, I felt like they were really authentic because I wasn't trying to make them in the fashion of a certain artist or a certain genre. I was just playing what came to me. And when I heard a cool chord progression or a cool riff, as rudimentary as they might seem in retrospect now, I thought to myself, oh, I can write some words on top of that. But I
Hmm.
still realized the influence that, for instance, the blues had on me. Like I would sing in a really bluesy way because that's how BB King sang, and I wanted to sing like that.
Hmm.
And my friends who I would play with in high school were like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. That sounds really like gospely, bluesy sort of thing. Can you do more of that?" And so that there, I was encouraged to do that as well. But it really wasn't until I got to college, another Seventh Day Adventist institution, where I started participating more as like a worship leader. Because then at the time, the worship music industry, people like Hillsong Church, Chris Tomlin, David Crowder Band started to come out, and they started to come out with music that was centered around really big distorted guitars. And I thought, oh, well, maybe there is a place for me somewhere in religious music. And I started leading worship because I thought, well, if I can crank up my guitar, I mean, that would make me feel better about participating in this religious music. That's great.
Hmm.
And so then, and I was involved then, from the early 2000s on in religious communities all over Southern California, whether I was playing guitar or later I picked up bass guitar and would play that as well. But I still wasn't writing religious music until I met this guy who was a worship leader from the town over. I'm in Riverside, and in Southern California, there's a town right across the border from where I am, of the city named Corona. And this worship leader was from Corona, and he came to my church and he goes, "Hey man, I'd really love for you to come check out my studio. I'm a musician too." And as you know, when someone says that, most of the time they're talking about the fact that they have a computer in their mom's basement and they have a microphone. And that's kind of a common sort of story we all deal with. And then you go and you're like, oh, okay, this is not something I want to be doing a whole lot. But when I went to this guy's studio, this was before the digital revolution made everything sound like you could produce amazing things inside your computer. So he
Hmm.
had a ton of outboard gear at his place. I mean, like racks of it, like 30 grand of outboard gear. And I was like, wait a minute, what did you say you did again? I know you're a worship leader. And he goes, oh, I'm a producer for Warner Entertainment. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And so I started hanging out there a lot because I was like, oh, okay. Like if this guy wants me to hang out, like we'll A/B stuff, we'll record some things. This could be cool. But up until that point, I'd never put together like a record or a compilation of music or anything like that. And so one day he said to me, hey, I think you need to do a worship record. And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm not really into that sort of thing. I mean, I was fine at that point leading worship for my local community, but I never thought to myself, I want to be Chris Tomlin. I want to be David Crowder or Matt Redman or anything like that.
Hmm.
I never wanted to kind of be that and have to tour that and all that stuff. And I was really conflicted. I still had that tension within me. And he said, surely you have bits and pieces of religious music in your phone. I said, yes, the majority of it is like secular stuff that I've written down, like little sound clips I've recorded in my phone. But I thought, well, maybe if the mood strikes, I'll have a little religious music clip here and there. If I ever was in a songwriting session with a worship or religious musician, then I would have something like to contribute to their music or their work or something like that. And I thought that's a way that I can kind of save these and see if I can use them later. But I never expected to build an entire record around them. And I gave him every excuse in the book. I said, dude, I don't have any money. My wife was pregnant with our child at the time. And
Mhm.
I thought, like, there's no way I can pay for a whole recording project, even if it was a 4, 5, 6 song EP. I was like, that still is going to cost a lot, especially if this dude is a producer, Warner. Like, this is not some kind of, computer only project with your friends. And so I gave him that excuse and I said, dude, I don't have any money. I don't have any music to write. He goes, you can always write music. And he goes, I tell you what, if you bring in your friends to record the music, like just call in any favors you might have, I'll do the recording, the mixing, and the mastering. I'll sponsor the record. And I was like, oh, okay. So I thought to myself, thinking religiously, I thought, well, if God's going to open a door like this, I'd better be faithful and walk through it and do the best that I can do it with what I've got. So I called in every favor I had with every musician friend I had. And we got probably 10 or 12 people on a EP of 6 songs. And it was it was kind of rock centered, very sort of psalmic in nature. It was just, praise God this, praise God that. And we wrote it by the seat of our pants. I remember one session, I was at his studio and I had written the verse and the chorus. And we stopped and he goes, yeah, it's a pretty good take. Okay, I'm going to set up for the second verse now. And I was writing it as he was saying that. And I said, all right, I think I got it. Hold on. He goes, you ready? And I finished this line and I said, yeah, I think we're ready. Let's go. Let's go ahead and do that. And that was mostly how we recorded the record, by the seat of our pants. And
Mhm.
that first record, you can find it everywhere you can stream, is called the Declaration EP. And it's my name, Kevin Straine, on it. And I was really proud of it. I was like, I learned so much and we did so much and we really crafted this thing and it was amazing. And Lucas, my friend, the producer, Lucas Pimentel, he's my worship leader now at La Sierra University Church. He really showed me a ton of stuff. He let me into the process and helped me see that it's a ton of work, but it was really rewarding to be able to do all that, do the CD reproduction, which nobody buys CDs now, but I have a ton of them in my garage. So I did all that. I set up the social media accounts. I did everything, and I was like, wow, that like I'm amazed at the thing we created and that process. Like I learned so much. It was really cool.
Awesome. Um, so you kind of went over a bunch of stuff there that kind of fell
Yeah,
into the vein. It fell into the veins of the types of questions that I typically ask anyway. So I won't make you repeat any of that. Instead, we'll kind of
sure.
just jump ahead. So where can people check out your stuff and follow you or listen to the material you're making?
Sure. So, the hub is kevinstrain.com. You can check that out there. It has links to my Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. And you can check out the record I released pre-COVID, which is my second record, and it's a really cool record actually about making sure the Christian church knows that the LGBTQ plus community is loved and they should not be shunned like they have been through much of Christian church history, unfortunately. And so it's a record that I'm really proud of. It tells the LGBTQ plus community, hey, you are God's children too, despite what the church says in the world. Because if we look at the teachings of Jesus, humanity is what Jesus came for, and that really reflected itself in the second record. And I was amazed that I felt like I was called to make that record because it's a bit controversial, but also very needed because I know so many of my LGBTQ plus friends, are still looking for, guidance on a faith journey, and every like religion seemingly shuts them out. And if you look at the teachings of Jesus Christ, there's no reason whatsoever that they should be excluded. Jesus
Mm-hmm.
was all about inclusion. And so I think we need to remember that as a church organization, that that it's radical inclusivity, and we should be incorporating these people into our communities rather than shutting them out. So I'm really
Excellent.
proud of that one.
Excellent. And I always like to give the person that I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word at the end of the interview. So, just a message that you feel you resonate with.
Sure. I think it's radical inclusivity, man. For anyone who's a Christian, it doesn't matter if people don't like you, if people like you, if people hate you, whatever. We're called to love all these people. Even people that traditionally the institutionalized Christian church has said, stay away from those people, keep those people out. The ministry of Jesus says that we are to love those people, even if they hate us, even if we hate them. There's very specific rules, and if you follow, what Jesus talks about in the Bible, it's a real radical life of making sure that everybody's included, no matter if you disagree with them or not. And I think that can be hard to do, but it also is well worth it because, especially if you include the people that the religious community has shunned and done damage to, I think we need to rectify that. And I think before we move forward, we need to apologize to those communities and make sure that we come together to take care of people's needs. And that's what the gospel is really about, recognizing that Jesus did that for us and we can do it for everyone else. And we can stand up with the oppressed and with the people who are shut out of institutions of power like Christianity has become.